Here's what we would have done in past Hebrew Gospel Pearls.
Yeah.
We would have been talking about the verse, give you the verse, and then say, but I've got the smoking gun in the plus. Here's what we're doing instead. You're giving our public people are getting something that is a smoking gun.
Oh, this
is the kind of thing
look,
that
this is huge. Shalom and welcome to Hebrew Gospel Pearls, episode 24. Today we will talk about the verse I've been waiting the entire series to get to, Matthew 5:17.
Oh boy, we're just going to let you do your thing, Nehemia.
I'm so excited about this one.
Yes.
So let's start with the verse. Do you want to read? Can you start reading it in Greek?
Yeah, right.
Your English translation of the Greek.
Yes, absolutely. Here we go. 5:17. Hold on.
Is this the NASB?
Yes. Here it is, 5:17. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill.
Wow.
And I'm telling you right now, Nehemia, this is going to be, I don't know if we'll ever, I don't know how long, it's going to take a long time to get out of this verse.
This verse for me is I get people all the time who ask me, and rightfully so, why on earth are you spending so much of your energy and time and resources on studying the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua, when you're not a Christian? And I think it's a large part because of this verse. I grew up with the idea that Jesus, the Jesus of Christianity, and growing up Jewish, I was taught that, yes, the Christians, they believe in Jesus, and he abolished the Torah. He led people astray, was the term, mesito mediach, which is he incited and led astray. And how did he incite and lead astray? He told the people, you don't have to keep the Torah anymore. The Torah has been done away with. And years later, when I was a young adult and I was having a conversation with a Christian gentleman, and he was keeping the Torah, and he asked, well, how can you keep the Torah? And he read me this verse. I got to say, Keith, it was like somebody took a book and smacked me in the face with it.
Really?
So I'm like, that can't be in the New Testament. What? What? No, that's contrary to everything that Christianity is about, which is that, the Jews, they follow the old covenant, and the Christians now have the new covenant, which has replaced the old covenant. And part of that is abolishing the law, and Jesus is the new law. Now, is this not what Christians teach?
Yeah, and actually, Nehemia, to be honest with you, we probably should have stopped Hebrew Gospel Pearls after the last episode. No. If we would have stopped after the last episode and shook hands and said, hey, this is great, we had a great time, we have 25 public and 25 plus episodes. But I have to be honest with you, this verse, 5:17, is one that it's not going to be easy to get through this one. It's not going to be easy to get through this one without having to address something for years you said you would never address.
What's that?
And what's that?
I don't know what.
You said you don't do theology.
Okay. I don't think we have to do theology.
I don't think we have to either.
I don't want to do theology. I want to focus on what the text says.
Absolutely.
Because theologically you can say, yes, the purpose of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ was to, fulfill some function, and therefore we don't keep. Okay, that could be, that could not be.
Right.
That's a matter of theology. What does the text say?
Exactly.
And this text is as clear as you could possibly be.
So what I want you to do, again, folks, we're used to doing this. I want you to read it in Hebrew, and then I want you to translate it Nehemia style.
Okay, Nehemia style. All right. I'm not sure I know what that means, but sure.
I do.
So, all right, let me pull up. I've got here. This is interesting here.
Yes.
Because it's interesting. In the last few episodes, we talked about Dr. Mark 2 episodes ago, and about textual criticism. But I just realized this: there were almost no textual critical issues in those verses we covered. 13 and then 14 through, right? Whether he was written with a vav or a yud, which was a very trivial issue, which illustrated, kind of what was going on with textual criticism.
And can we say something? But you still checked all the manuscripts.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's just nothing interesting to talk about. Here we've got some major textual critical issues. to the point where we have a sharp distinction between what I've called Group A and Group B.
Amen.
And then we have a piece of I don't even know how we're going to have time to do all this, but there's a smoking gun. Now, we brought a smoking gun in a previous episode from what I call Manuscript Q, and it turns out Manuscript Q has layers to it I didn't even know about, and it really shed some light on what was going on. So let me read the verse.
Okay.
I'm going to read it first from the B group. The B group includes the British Library manuscript, which is what George Howard used. Ba'et hahi amar Yeshua letalmidav. At that time, Yeshua said to his disciples, Al tachshavu shabati lahafer Torah. Do not think that I have come to abolish the Torah or violate the Torah, invalidate the Torah. Ela lahashlim, but rather to complete, to make perfect. We'll talk about what that means if we have time. Now, Group A manuscripts, and I'm going to read specifically from Q, has something not that different, but slightly different. Ba'et hahi amar Yeshua letalmidav. At the time, Yeshua said to his disciples, Al tachshavu shabati lahafer Torah ve'hanevi'im. Do not think that I have come to abolish the Torah and the prophets. Lo bati lahafer el lahashlim. I have not come to abolish, but rather to complete, to fulfill. Mm-hmm. And the difference there is 4 words. Mm-hmm. 4 words we don't find in the B group, which includes manuscripts. And I'm giving letters because each one has like a long name, right? Mm-hmm. Like Z is London British Library. I don't even remember the number. Mm-hmm. And so I was calling it Manuscript Z. So the manuscripts that don't have the 4 words and the prophets I did not come to abolish are Z, C, N, T, V, E, F. Let's see. And then what I call gamma, B, L, and R. Mm-hmm. So there's 11 manuscripts that have the verse but don't have those 4 words.
Right.
I want to look at Manuscript Q because it turns out Q is the key to this entire mystery of these 4. And this is a text critical problem, right? In other words, in Matthew 5:17, does it say, I did not come to abolish the Torah but to fulfill? Or does it say, I did not come to abolish the Torah and the prophets, but I did not come to abolish but to fulfill, right? So, or don't think that I have come to abolish the Torah but to fulfill, or don't think that I have come to abolish the Torah and the prophets. I did not come to abolish but to fulfill. So are those, and in Hebrew that's 4 words, and the prophets, right? In English it's and the prophets. In Hebrew it's 1 word, ve'hanevi'im, lo bati lahafer, no, I came to abolish. Mm-hmm. Okay? And we'll talk about what lahafer means if we have time, to abolish.
What do you mean? It's in my notes. I have to have time.
Okay,
I got little red letters.
We got so much to talk about here. So now for the text critical issue. And this is a smoking gun. This is literally the smoking gun. Although I guess not literally because it's not a gun and it's not smoking. It's a manuscript. So here is Manuscript Q. Let's look at it over here. Mm-hmm. And we can see right there, a little bit below the middle of the page, we have a bunch of words written in a smaller script in a different handwriting above the line. Mm-hmm. And what are those 4 words? They're the 4 words, and the prophets I did not come to abolish.
Wow.
So what is that? Why are they written above the line? Because the scribe was reading his text, and he at some point realized there's 4 words missing, and he added them. Mm. And here's the question, where did he add them from? Mm-hmm. So, George Howard published the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew in 1987. Actually, the one you have there is from 1995. You want to show people that?
Yes.
That's the 1995 edition called the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. His 1987 edition was called the Gospel of Matthew according to a primitive Hebrew text.
Stop.
I
decided in preparation.
You still have that?
I decided in preparation for the next 3 episodes to bring the Gospel of Matthew according to a primitive Hebrew text, which, folks, I want to say to you, I received this in the mail. You remember the mail? Nehemia?
What we call snail mail in my generation.
I want to set the stage because this is really important. So Nehemia says to me, hey, listen, I'd like to study with you the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. I'm going to send you a text. And so, tell me the process that you had to go through to send me this.
So they had this at the...
What year was it? 20, 15, 18 years ago?
Wow. It would have been 2003 or 2.
And by the way,
remember.
let me just say something. In episode 19, I have something that he wrote. I'm going to ask him to actually say it's pretty amazing.
Is it in there?
Yes.
You're kidding me. All right.
Anyway, go ahead.
I hope I'll be able to read my own handwriting. So I was studying at Hebrew University at the time at the Mount Scopus campus in Jerusalem, and I was doing the research on this topic, and they had the copy of that book. They actually didn't have the 1995 edition at the time. They had the 1987 edition.
Which you liked the title better. You liked
it was a much more academic title. Let's say the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, that was marketing.
According to a primitive Hebrew text.
The Gospel of Matthew according to a primitive Hebrew text is that's a very academic title.
And there are some differences.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, they're completely different.
Yes.
Well, the body of the text isn't completely different, but his introduction is different. What he did in the 95 edition, if I remember correctly, is he took a bunch of journal articles, slapped them together, and put them as an intro to his book. And in 87, what he had done is he gave his own introduction, actually. It was a lot more detailed and I found more interesting. So what I did is I went to the basement of Mount Scopus library, the main library, and I photocopied the book. Yeah. And because you couldn't buy it anywhere that I could find. And then I had it spiral bound with that like plastic spiral kind of thing they did back then in Jerusalem. I don't know if they still do that. And I sent it to you in the snail mail. All right, international mail.
Yeah, and the reason I'm bringing that up, Nehemia, is that when I received that invitation, that started me on a process. And that process has been long to get to this point. And again, 5, 17, 18, and 19 are the key. So I'm sorry.
Now, if we did it today, we'd just make a PDF, right? But back then, that wasn't the way you did it. So in this book, The Gospel of Matthew according to a primitive Hebrew text, George Howard hypothesizes, he suggests that there was a process where the text was very different from the Greek, and over time it was modified to match the Greek. What we are looking at right here on the screen is the smoking gun that proves Howard's hypothesis.
Wow.
So we have there the 4 words written above the line, and it gets better. So these 4 words were written above the line, and in all of the manuscripts from the A group, those words appear, but in all the other manuscripts, they're not written above the line, they're in the body of the text. And what that means is the next time they copied this, they copied those words into the body of the text. Now, we've got to ask a very important question. How do we know that they copied those words into the body of the text from above the line? Maybe they were in the body of the text in all the other A group manuscripts, and then in one of them they left it out, so they came and they fixed it, right? And they added it above the line. That's always a possibility. So here's one piece of evidence. It seems that in every place where there's writing above the line, so far as I've been able to see so far, and if I find different, I'll share with the people. But in several instances, whenever there's writing above the line, in Manuscript Q, and there's a lot of places in Manuscript Q where there's writing above the line, in those very same places, those words are missing from the B group, right? So it seems that Manuscript Q is that link, the missing link between there's a bunch of words that are not in the text in the B group, and then the A group, they're in the text, and in Q, they're written above the line.
Now, certainly you're going to tell me this, Nehemia. You did that on purpose. You purposely titled that Manuscript Q, because all through my seminary, all through my studies, we always talked about Q. There's Q. Q is the thing that's missing. But is this just...
So Q in New Testament studies is the source. Right. It's a complete coincidence.
God incidence.
Oh, God incidence, sure.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. So the reason I called it Q is that Howard listed his manuscripts A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Right? He had 8 manuscripts plus the British Library he didn't give a letter to. I call that Manuscript Z. Right, so just from Howard, I've got 9 manuscripts, and then I sat down at the National Library of Israel at the Institute of Microfilmed Hebrew Manuscripts and started looking for more manuscripts. And as I looked for them, I gave them letters: J, K, L, M, N, O, P,
and
Q. And it's simply in the order that I found it, right?
What?
And how did I find it? I did all kinds of different complicated searches, right? Because they're not always, sometimes it's part of the Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew, sometimes it's not part of Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew, it's a thing by itself. Yeah. So,
but let me just say something.
Yeah,
Just, I gotta say
I'm
this.
listening. Yeah.
At this time, now in the past, previous Hebrew Gospel Pearls, here's what we would have done. I'm going to throw us both under the bus. Here's what we would have done in past Hebrew Gospel Pearls.
Yeah.
We would have been talking about the verse, give you the verse, and then say, but I've got the smoking gun in the plus. Here's what we're doing instead. You're giving our public people are getting something that is a smoking gun.
Oh,
I mean, this is the kind of thing.
Look, this is huge.
Yeah. I mean, am I right or wrong?
This is like what do the Russians call it? The mother bomb.
Yes.
It's like the bombus, whatever it's called. This is huge.
Yes.
This is a major thing.
Yes.
Now, I want to bring another piece of evidence which I didn't know about until relatively recently. I actually found that I did know about it in my notes, but I'd forgotten. Mm-hmm. Okay, I had notes from like 15 years ago. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I already knew about that. But I had forgotten about this. So there are 3 manuscripts, 2 of which are copies of the first one. And how do I know that 2 are a copy of the first one? Mm-hmm. So it's very common in manuscripts to have something called a colophon.
Yes.
A colophon is information written when you're done writing a manuscript or you're done with a certain section of the manuscript. And the colophon gives information about who wrote it, who copied it. Mm-hmm. So Manuscript Q has a colophon, not from the original author, but from the copyist who copied that particular manuscript. Mm-hmm. And the colophon says as follows. It's pretty interesting here. So it says, I, Menachem Moscato, son of my Lord Father Moses, this is the scribe who is copying this, wrote in the region of Friuli in the city of Porto Guararo, and it was completed on Tuesday, the 5th of Sivan in the year 5344, which is equivalent to May 15th, 1584 in the Gregorian calendar. So this colophon, let me show you what it looks like. Unfortunately, I don't have a color image of this because I only ordered color images from Manuscript Q of the main pages because it was like 15 euros a page. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get this page I only have in black and white. But here's the really incredible thing, okay? So that's Manuscript Q. This now here is the same colophon in Manuscript K. Verbatim. I, Menachem Moscato, son of my Lord Father Moses, wrote here in Friuli in the city of Porto Guararo, and it was completed on such and such a date. So we have 2 manuscripts, and one of them has a copy, not just of the text, but of the colophon of the other manuscript. Mm-hmm. So that means we can say quite definitively that K is a copy of Q. Mm-hmm. And here's where it gets really exciting, Keith. So in Q, those 4 words are written above the line.
Right.
In K, which is a copy of Q, to the point where it even has the same colophon, those 4 words are in the body of the text.
Oh!
So, George Howard in 1987 hypothesizes that we have a bunch of differences between the manuscript. Over time, there's a process of making and those 4 words are in the Greek. Did I mention that?
Absolutely.
The 4 words that are not in the British Library, they're not in the B group, they're only in the A group, those 4 words are in the Greek. So Howard's hypothesis was, well, originally Hebrew Matthew, as Shem Tov wrote it, had a lot of differences from the Greek, and over time it was modified to match the Greek. And here we have the smoking gun, where the scribe wrote those 4 words above the line, and then in the next copy of that exact manuscript, the 4 words are in the body of the text.
Now, Nehemia, listen.
I'm done.
You can't be done because I got to ask you a controversial question.
Yeah.
There's no answer to this. I have a theory.
Yeah.
So, in the Greek, it says, and the prophets. In other words, it's Torah and the prophets. Right. I'm just throwing this out. Why might the Greek want to do that?
It's a good question. Why do you think so I have a theory, but I want to hear yours first.
I have a theory too, because we're going to deal with this later in the episode. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to go too far, but I at least have to say this. At that time, this is what Howard says. At that time, I love that he did that, Ba'etahi, Jesus said to his disciples, do not think I came to annul the Torah, but to fulfill it. And that the English says, the Torah and the prophets. Well, maybe that same people that were, trying to, how you might say...
abolish the Torah?
maybe I should put it this way, theology-wise, theological.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a theological issue here. In other words, if he is coming to fulfill it, that it needs to be the Torah and the prophets. Just a thought.
Okay, in other words, so if you look at, and let's put it this way, if you look at the verses that according to the New Testament that Yeshua fulfilled, what percentage of those are in the Torah
versus the
prophets?
Exactly.
And a much higher percentage are in the prophets. And so in other words, what I think you're suggesting, and this is what I was thinking too, is that if you're focusing on the word to fulfill, and the word to fulfill there means, as it's understood by most Christians, I think, that to fulfill the law and the prophets means through the messianic prophecies. Right? Isaiah said he would be born of a virgin. I've now fulfilled it through being born of a virgin, right? So if that's your understanding of what fulfill means, I understand why you would add in and the prophets. What I love about this, here's what to me is so powerful about textual criticism. I could say, well, the wind is blowing that way, and therefore I prefer the Greek versus the Hebrew. And I could even say, well, even some of the Hebrew manuscripts have that. So it's not just the Greek, it's some of the Hebrew manuscripts are in agreement. But now I've got the smoking gun. I didn't bring Manuscript A, which also has the same colophon, by the way, and also has those words in the body of the text. So it's 3 manuscripts, 2 of which were copied from Q or from maybe an intermediary. So it's not just some arbitrary decision to say, well, I prefer this reading. I can show with definitive and objective evidence how I know that the original, as Howard called it, the primitive Hebrew text, at the very least the text that Shem Tov had in 1380 did not have and the prophets, that it was added in Manuscript Q, and then from there it disseminated to the other of the A group. So that's what I love about textual criticism, is it gives me the tools. It's like a toolkit, that it gives me the ability to objectively deal with this kind of issue and answer it, not just from my opinion or my theology, but in an objective way.
Wow. I love it, man.
Boy, there's so much to talk about here. I don't even know how we're going to do this, and I think we might have to do a little bit of a longer session today, if you'll
absolutely, because I want to give I'm so glad that we're doing this for the public episode, because this is a lot of the hard hat stuff that we end up doing in Plus for all of those other ones. I mean, going deep into the manuscripts and this kind of thing, and now you're starting out that way, which I really love that, so people can see it. But can we at least address the issue of a little bit of the meaning of the words? I mean, in other words, are you ready to do that?
I want to start with reading something from the Word Biblical Commentary, if you'll allow me.
You really? What's this thing? What's this new thing about the Word? All of a sudden,
it's got some interesting insights.
What's this thing where you're going to them for the commentary? What is that about? I mean, you shocked me when you did that a couple times.
It's actually really good commentary.
I know it is. Dr. Moster told me about it. Yeah, you did Word Biblical.
Okay.
But let me ask you.
Well, it takes a philological approach, which I appreciate, meaning it's looking at linguistics and history and archaeology.
Okay.
Now, it then will insert its theology, right? But you don't have to accept the theology. It actually separates those out. So here it says, it's on verse 17, do not think that I came, presupposes the existence of the opinion that is denied. So in other words, why would Yeshua say, do not think that I came to do X, Y, Z? Because there were people who thought that he came to do away with X, Y, Z. And so why would anybody think that? So let's discuss that. So I'm going to read on with the Word Biblical Commentary. Now, bear in mind that part of this is an evangelical, you might even call fundamentalist commentary, but part of it is how do I put this, higher criticism. We talked about lower criticism, which is textual criticism. Higher criticism is what they call the top half of the page, and it deals with, okay, who wrote these things and why? And it presupposes that what's written is not divinely inspired or not the Word of God. So I'm only going to read it not because I'm presenting that opinion, or I'm not because I'm presenting that as my opinion. This is what Word Biblical Commentary says, okay? He says, although it is unlikely that we are it is unlikely that we are to suppose that, like James, Matthew here opposes Paul, or an explicitly Pauline group. In other words, the assumption of the Word Biblical Commentary is that according to Paul, Yeshua did away with the Torah. He abolished the Torah. And according to the Word Biblical Commentary, James was opposed to this and upheld the Torah. In other words, it's arguing, and not just arguing, it's taking it as a given that there was a split in the early church between James, who said the Torah still stood, and Paul, who said the Torah was abolished. And so therefore, perhaps they projected the words into the mouth of Yeshua against Paul in order to say, do not think that I have come to do away with the Torah and the prophets. I've came not to do away with, to fulfill. That was a Jamesian idea contrary to Paul, okay? Now, they don't accept that explanation, but they bring up that explanation, which is maintained by other scholars. In other words, there's many scholars out there, very serious, learned scholars, who say that these words were fashioned in order to oppose what Paul was teaching and say, you know what, Paul? Yeshua himself said that he did not come to do with what you claimed he did. Now, I'm not saying that Paul did away with the Torah, right? I'm saying this is what they're saying, what these scholars are saying, what these Christian scholars are saying. And the Word Biblical Commentary mentions that as a possibility, but then kind of rejects it because they don't, they don't believe that there was a split really maybe between Paul and James, I guess, at least the author of this part of the commentary. He says, here it is fair to assume that Jesus' sovereign interpretation of the law was so out of step with contemporary interpretation, e.g. the Pharisees, that it seemed to many that Jesus was going against the law. In other words, they now say, no, when he said the Torah and the prophets, he didn't mean the Torah and the prophets. He meant the rabbinical interpretation of the Torah and the prophets. And according to the Word Biblical Commentary, he's saying, look, don't think I came to do away with the Torah and the prophets, even though I'm opposed to the rabbis.
Now, Nehemia.
Yeah.
Controversy. All right. So you're bringing the Word Biblical Commentary.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a little frustrated with you.
Look, you brought the Christian commentary a few episodes ago.
But here's what you didn't read. He puts in parentheses, and this is why this is so confusing to me at times. I'm glad you said who it is that writes. He says that it seemed to many that Jesus was going against the law, parentheses. Indeed, at one level we shall see that he does.
Well, we'll get to that in future episodes.
So this is what I want to do, and bear with me. I just want to do two small things, because I actually had this before that statement of the commentary, and that is two words. I just want us to look at one of them. Can we just look at one of them?
Sure.
The word is you use the word to annul. Okay. Okay, lehafer. Can I just read a few verses?
Sure.
Where the exact same. The way that it is there, that he uses it there, are used in other places. I'm going to use the one in 26:44 of Leviticus. Yet in spite of this, when they are in the land of the enemies, I will not reject them, nor will I so abhor them as to destroy them. And this is the NASB, I believe, breaking, lehafer, my covenant with them, for I am Yehovah their God. Next one. Then Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai, the Archite, is better than the counsel of Ahithophel, for Yehovah had ordained to thwart lehafer, the good counsel. And that's 2 Samuel 17:14. Just a couple more. For thus says Adonai Yehovah, I will also do with you as you have done, you who have despised the oath by breaking lehafer. Again, you gave in the A group and the B group, and I think it is in the B group, they use lehafer twice. In the A group, they use it once. So in other words, this is the word that we're using. The NASB is translated.
The other way, the B group has it once, A has it twice.
Has it twice. Two more. Now he despised the oath by breaking, lehafer, the covenant. This is Ezekiel 17:18, Zechariah 11:14. Then I cut in pieces my second staff union to break, lehafer. Now I'm giving you the NASB's translation of that word. One more I want to give. And hired counselors against them to frustrate, lehafer, their counsel all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia. That's Ezra 4:5. When you translated it, what did you say? Now, I mean, I've got lehafer, to break, to annul, to how do you see the word?
So it's definitely used in the context of someone who is doing something that expresses that the covenant is no longer valid. Okay. So in other words, in Hebrew, you have this balance. You cut a covenant, that's karat, and lehafer is you abolish a covenant. Okay, so the abolishing the covenant could be by violating the terms of the covenant, or just saying it's no longer valid.
So here's the thing. So when I see that, so this idea of breaking. Now there's another word, and I don't know if we're gonna have time to get to this or not, because it's the issue of, it says, do not think. That word, there's depth, Nehemia. I mean, we should do a Bible study on that word.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
so I love Michael Rood has this beautiful teaching where he's talking about context and how important context is. Because without context, you could say, well, Yeshua taught you not to think. What do you mean he taught me not to think? He says, do not think, right? But you got to keep reading. You got to read the full verse. Yeah. Right?
I mean, do we talk about that word? Or what's your thought?
Wow. So we have so much to talk about. Give me a few more minutes. So
Absolutely.
I want to quote you, though.
Okay.
So while we were doing our secret study with Nelson, you wrote something and I typed it down verbatim. Keith, quote, there were already people at the time of the Sermon on the Mount that said, he has come to release us from the Torah.
And with that, we're going to the plus section.
Hold on. How did we go from, I have not come to do away with the Torah, to the very purpose of my coming to earth was to set mankind free from the Torah? And look, that is this theological, I don't know what the word is, problem in a sense that Christians have. Christianity, by and large, right? Obviously there's exceptions, but most Christians teach the Torah has been done away with. It's been replaced with a new covenant. And how do we explain away Matthew 5:17? And the answer that's often given, which I don't know if we'll get to in the plus, is that the word to fulfill means to fulfill prophetically.
Let me tell you something, folks.
And once it's fulfilled prophetically, we don't need it anymore.
Let me tell you something, folks. My friend Howard, who tiptoes around the tulips, his text, he does a theological gymnastics. And Nehemia, I want to say to you right now, I mean, it would be easy for us to kind of pass over it, but I think we got to lean into that. I don't care how long it takes. It's on Nehemia's wall anyway, the plus section. You know that, right?
Yeah.
We can take hours to talk about this. It's really important that we walk away understanding what it means, language, history, and context on the issue of English fulfilled.
So let me tell you what I want to do in the plus section, since we're not going to have time to get to it until the plus section. So here's one of the things I want to do. I want to ask the question. I've been waiting a long time until we got to do this. So we saw in the Word Biblical Commentary, there is this assumption that Paul taught the Torah was done away with, and James taught that the Torah was still valid. Okay. Let's leave that assumption aside and work under the assumption that Paul didn't abolish the Torah. Because if Paul abolished the Torah, then we know when the Torah was abolished. But let's leave that aside and say, other than Paul, which most Christians say abolished the Torah, what's the earliest source where the Torah is explicitly, in the mouth of a Christian, abolished? And I don't know if I found the earliest source, but I've got some really, really good sources that explicitly say the Torah has been abolished. And here's why it's important. There's a lot of people out there have this idea that up until the Council of Nicaea, everyone in the church was a Messianic Jew. They went to the synagogue, they prayed 3 times a day, they put on phylacteries. Not only were they Messianic Jews, they were rabbinical Messianic Jews. And then Constantine came along and abolished that and made Christianity into the anti-Torah, antinomian, is the technical term, antinomian Christianity is today. And what we're going to look at is sources that show that way before the Council of Nicaea, in 325 AD, headed by established by Constantine, there were people who taught against the Torah, and there were people who taught in favor of the Torah. And just some of the sources we'll have, hopefully look at if we have time, is the Epistle of Barnabas, written between the year 70 and 132 CE, meaning after the destruction of the temple, before the Bar Kokhba revolt. Irenaeus, who wrote around the year 180 AD, and Justin Martyr, who's writing around the year 150 AD. And I'm not bringing these to prove that people in the early church didn't follow the Torah. What I'm trying to find out is, okay, some people were still following the Torah in the 4th century. And I know that because there's church fathers who rebuke them for doing so. But at what point did the other group gain existence, come into existence, where there were people who saying, no, the Torah's done away with, right? And most Christians would say, well, that was Paul, right? He would say, now that you have Jesus, you don't need the Torah. Okay, but let's leave Paul out of it, because people have whole entire ministries dedicated to trying to understand Paul. Let's focus on, other than Paul, what are your definitive statements where people have said that the Torah has been done away with? And in contrast, how does that compare to the people who are still keeping the Torah? And by people, I mean followers of Yeshua.
Yeah, that's why I say Nehemia. And I'm glad that the plus section is going to be at Nehemia's wall. You single-handedly have been supporting our research assistant through Nehemia's wall. And as a result of our conversation that we were having, we were digging. And I say to myself, and there's so much digging. There's so much that came up. And you're going to share it in the plus section.
Well, and the other thing I want to share, and this I think, and I'm divided here. So we're going to do the plus section, and I'm debating whether we should do a plus, because there's something I want to share.
Only if the plus is at BFAinternational.com. No. If it's not, we're going to do one plus section.
So the plus, and maybe we'll get to it in the plus if we have time. Yeah. I want to bring the only testimony of a New Testament statement of Yeshua's teaching that appears in all of early Jewish literature.
Amen.
In other words, in the entire New Testament, everything that Yeshua taught that's recorded in the New Testament, there is one single verse that appears. It's actually in the Babylonian Talmud, and it's quoted from Yeshua, meaning it's attributed to him, and that. I want to bring that and share that with people, and that's Matthew 5:17.
Absolutely.
Which is incredible.
And what I'm saying is,
if you think about the entire New Testament, there's one verse for which we have independent corroboration outside of Christian literature, and it's Matthew 5:17. Yes. And what that reveals is, I think, kind of mind-blowing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So let's talk about it.
All right. So guys, I'm really excited about the plus. I can't wait. Yehovah, thank you. I want to say, Baruch atah Adonai. Eloheinu melech haolam, she'echianu v'kimanu v'gianu l'man hazeh. Blessed are you, Yehovah, O Lord, King of the universe, who has sustained us and allowed us to live to reach this point, that we actually made it to Matthew 5:17, where we'll be able to share some of the most exciting things in the entire series. I'm very excited, and I'm so thankful. Thank you for giving me the knowledge to be able to find these sources and share them with people. Amen.
Father, thank you for our people that are listening. Thank you that they can get a little bit of a taste of what's been happening over these previous, so many of these episodes where Nehemia's been able to bring information that literally the world hasn't been able to see and to interact with. And we've been able to be blessed by being able to glean from his many years of study, expertise in this area. Now we ask that you bless those that are listening, bless those that will go to the plus, and bless us as we continue to consider what it means to lead in this area, to teach in this area, to share in this area. Thank you for Hebrew Gospel Pearls and all that it has been, all that it is, and hopefully all that it will be. In your name, amen.
Amen.